Hello, good morning, Joe. Thank you for making time to speak with us about international business.
Morning, Gunjan. It's great to be with you this morning.
Terrific. I've enjoyed working with you for the last year and then some. And so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your experience in working internationally. Which countries did you first start with, and how has it been for you?
My international experience actually goes back almost 40 years because I've worked for a number of different companies, including multinational companies where my headquarters was outside the United States. I've worked for companies that have done business in multiple countries around the world. And now in my role leading a major trade association here in California, in my search for partnerships for our companies in every major continent where life science business is done. So I've done business in every continent, in all the major European countries, Germany, the UK, France, Spain, Italy, in the Middle East, in Egypt, throughout Asia, Japan, China, Korea, Singapore, Thailand, most recently in India with you, in Australia, and here in North America, South America, in Canada, Mexico, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. And I could name a lot more, but I think you get the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I do envy your frequent flyer miles.
Yeah, yeah, over
Yeah.
many years.
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine that on one of these flights overseas, you're sitting next to the CEO of another company who is, really embarking on international business, maybe for the first time, or maybe they've just done a little bit of work with Canada, and they ask you, what's it like, Joe? What should I prepare myself for? What would you tell them?
Well, that's not an unusual experience because I take many of our CEOs in my organization to some of the countries where we're trying to create partnerships. And a lot of the time, those are CEOs who lead small to mid-sized companies. A lot of the time in this industry that I work in, life science, those CEOs come out of a science background and not necessarily a business or international business background. Mm-hmm. And you're right, when it comes to Canada, I think people are comfortable doing business where they speak the same language and the culture is very similar. And we certainly find that when we're working in Canada or in Australia or some of the English-speaking countries where language is easy. But one of the things that I tell the CEOs is that they really need to be, first of all, familiar with some of the cultural nuances about doing business. They need to be familiar with the cultural nuances of doing business in the country that they're planning to work in, because countries have very different business practices, and those business practices a lot of the time are also woven into their social practices. So the combination of doing business and socializing is really important. A lot of people are very anxious. A lot of people are fearful about doing business, especially in countries where the language is very different. So, I always tell them too that it's important to work with someone who's very familiar with the practices, the business practices and other practices, how to get around transportation systems, hotels, some of the logistical systems, things as well that they're going to need help with, especially in countries where the language is unfamiliar to them.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you, Joe. Do you have, with all of the travel that you've done in business in so many countries, do you want to share one or two anecdotes about something that might surprise or educate an American CEO who's planning to expand internationally?
Well, I've had a lot of, I think, very positive experiences doing business in really every country that I've done business in. I certainly have had some experiences that would probably best be described as war stories in some of those countries as well, where, For example, in Egypt, transportation isn't always as efficient as we might expect it to be in some places. And I've had to be very careful about the kind of transportation that I use. Once got into a local taxi cab that ended up in traffic and getting forced off the road, and then ended up having to get out of that cab and find myself other transportation on my own. So again, I think you have to know the transportation systems that you're working in. That's been a challenge. I've also experienced not being entirely familiar with some of the communications practices. In fact, my early experiences in Japan, I was kind of fooled into thinking that when I was having conversations with people and they kept shaking their head, yes, 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 or saying yes, that meant that they were in agreement with me, not knowing until later on that we really hadn't made any agreement at all, that they were simply communicating that they understood what I was saying.
Right.
So you experience all kinds of different things in different countries.
Would any of those dissuade someone from doing business in another country, you think, or should they charge ahead and learn the practices? What would you advise them?
I think the first thing that I've found in my own experience going all the way back, and especially with what was a very fortunate experience for me to work with a Fortune 100 company in my early career with people who had a lot of experience within the company doing international business, is just that you should simply make sure that you have an open mind. I think it always helps if you're the kind of person who is interested or even excited about exploring new cultures and new ways of doing things and appreciating the different ways of doing things. You shouldn't go into any kind of international business opportunity with the idea that the way we do things is the best way to do things, or even more than that, with any level of impatience or intolerance, because we tend to do things here in the United States at a much more rapid pace than business is done in many other parts of the world. So it takes patience, it takes the interest in understanding other cultures, and it takes open-mindedness and a real desire to explore those opportunities that might exist in other places.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, you traveled to India for the first time very recently. Tell us a little bit about your first time in India. Yes,
it was my first time in India. The only experience that I had with India was watching movies about India, and also anything that I had seen on National Geographic or other types of documentary movies about India. Always had been interested, because I'm one who's very interested in doing business in other parts of the world, and especially learning other cultures. But when I talk specifically about India in terms of the life science industry, I expected that India would be a place where I would see basically the ability to do low-cost generic manufacturing of products. I didn't really know what to expect in terms of the culture and the geography and the urban environments in India. But as one who really enjoys opportunities to do business in new places, I found India, first of all, to be a very beautiful country. I found India to be a country that was very welcoming, very service oriented and friendly and polite people, both those whom we did business with when I was there, and also the hospitality in the restaurants and hotels and other places good transportation systems in India, easy flights everywhere that we traveled, very efficient, modern airports. And so I came back from India with a much different experience than, let's say, the expectation that I had when we went to India.
What was your biggest surprise when you spent that week in India?
Oh, clearly my biggest surprise in the week that we spent in India was the modern facilities, every bit as up to date in terms of technology and construction in the life science facilities that we visited. And combined with that, the extremely high level of talent and training of the people who ran and worked in those facilities.
Did you get time to look around the cities at all, or can you describe the hotels and places we stayed at a little bit?
I think in terms of the hotels and places we stayed at, I think you raised a really important point, and I didn't think about this until you brought it up. But you know, it's always important, I think, to have a balance between the business you're doing and really taking the time to experience the culture and the food and the sites in the places that you're visiting. And so I thought our trip to India had great balance. And I know when we planned the trip that you had said to me early on, it's important to really take the time to experience the culture. The food was amazing. The hotels were just top level in terms of accommodations and service, better than many hotels that I've stayed in here in the United States and in other countries as well. And just the history and you know, the opportunity that I had one afternoon to see some of the sites in Delhi, the Parliament building and the embassies and the temples, just amazing to see.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, when I speak to executives who have not traveled to India, you know, once they open up to me, one of the things that they are often concerned about is the food, and they worry about getting Delhi belly, as they say. I don't know, what would be your advice to someone, you know, who's skittish about getting sick while they travel to India?
Getting sick on travel is an important thing to just be aware of as a possibility, right? Now, as I've traveled in different places, there are different reasons why you might get sick. You know, for example, I tend in most places that I go to stay away from drinking tap water, regardless of whether I'm told that it's okay to drink. The different balance of microbes and other things in different tap waters, regardless of whether they say it's safe, isn't always going to agree with you. Sometimes you have to be careful about the way food is prepared. So Gunjan, you were a great advisor to us in India relative to what we should and shouldn't eat. For example, a lot of fresh foods, vegetables, things like that are not cooked, and salads that are prepared by washing the food in tap water. Of course, you want to stay away from. But in terms of the safety of the food, I never had any hesitancy about that. Of course, Indian food can be very spicy. So I think you need to gauge your adventuresome nature when it comes to food. I like to try all kinds of foods because I've done that everywhere in the world. So as you probably saw when we were in India, my colleague Tim and I, who's also traveled all over the place, weren't real concerned about what we were trying. But I think the other thing that was important was having you there to ensure that you gave us appropriate warning and advice about just how adventuresome we should get.
Okay. And finally, I wanted to also ask you about, some companies want to, when they venture into a new country, they want to do it all themselves. Right? They'll send out their own team and essentially won't use third-party advisors, whereas other entities do rely on third-party advisors, local people, perhaps somebody who's very well educated about their geography within their own company. What would your advice be to someone who is considering an expansion of any kind towards India in particular?
Well, when I think about advice that I'd give about expanding into India, of course, it depends upon the size of the company. So let's not talk about the larger companies that have offices in other places and have large international staff and people from different cultures working within the company where they can tap into that resource regardless of what country they want to go into. I've never in the smaller companies that I've worked in, I've never gone to a new destination to do business without ensuring that I have an experienced and knowledgeable consultant to work with me. On the positive side, and let's focus on India. On the positive side, it's important to have someone who can advise you on doing business, who can even do some background research on the kind of business that you want to do that you wouldn't necessarily have the resources or the knowledge or the ability to do yourself. But just as important as that, I would never go into a new country to do business without having someone there at my side who's familiar with the transportation, with the hotels, with the communication, with the language, with the customs. Because if you don't, I can just simply say it's a formula for failure.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks, Gunjan. It's been a pleasure.